Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest monologue. And this is still on the Growing Up series. And this is talking about the fall of imperialism. And I'm not talking about the future fall of imperialism. I'm talking about the fall of imperialism that's happening right now. And in a lot of my previous talks, I've said that the in the progress of human civilization, the idea of empires invading others and toppling them and expanding their own through military means. I'm talking about like the days of the Ottomans, Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, etc. That is gone. That is gone. And after that ended, probably the last big sort of primitive military type interventions was World War II. And that's why I say when you look at Europe, civilization in Europe is count 80 years, 1945. That's when European civilization as it is today is that young. And what is happening now in Europe is just a reflection of that lifetime. There's a sort of 70, 80-year-old lifespan for narratives, to human narratives. It's closely related to, I think, the human life expectancy. Human narratives are built up, they grow, they become powerful, then they die within around 70 to 80 years. So empires now are not falling because of being conquered by others. Empires are falling under the weight of their own nonsense and contradictions. And I've detailed many of them, including the Soviet Union, communist China, which is now capitalist China, and the sort of the Western hegemony, or what European leaders like calling the rules-based world order. The rules-based world order is just the idea that Western white people are right and the rest of the world need to learn from them and follow them. That's the rules-based world order. You hear Keir Starmer talking about it, Ursula von der Leyen, and all other European leaders. And that's the shock that has come now with with the advent of the Trump presidency. Again, binary thinkers, this is not the time to start trying to work out, is this guy speaking in support of Trump or in support of I'm sharing ideas. If you can't sort of climb out of the binary box, maybe this is the time to scroll on to the next video. Um, the thing is, the advent of the Trump presidency is just the moment when the weight of the contradictions of Western imperialism has overwhelmed the structures holding up Western imperialism. So everybody was appalled. There was this infamous exchange, which I enjoyed immensely, between Zelensky and President Zelensky and Trump in the Oval Office with various other officials there. The body language was sort of pure comedy gold. The reaction of the Ukrainian ambassador, and then the trail of European leaders following then after that, trying to persuade Trump to change his stance. And he said, basically, what he said is that what's going on now is unsustainable, and we are chasing after a target which is unattainable. So it's not worth wasting any more money doing it. And then Europe is rallying together. Europe and Canada is rallying together to say we are going to step in to replace whatever support the US was offering under the Democrat administration. But anyone who reads or listens to world history will know that the countries now rallying to support Ukraine are those that have their security underwritten by the United States. So they're stepping in to replace the person who is actually been keeping them secure. So it's a very strange fallacy, but it's like comedy playing out on the world stage. Now I come to where it touches us here at home. When that exchange happened in the Oval Office, there was a very sharp polarization in opinion of Kenyans. And I'm talking about the Kenyans who are extremely offended by Trump's. Given, I agree, there were very rude remarks and unstatement like, but there were a number of Kenyans who were extremely offended by this. And I will state here that those are very, either they can only be two things about those people. They're either very ignorant, they don't know what's going on, the stuff I just explained, or they're extremely juvenile. Because, and this is why I've said many times before that Kenya is the imperialist dream. We are so imperialist. We love empire and all the nonsense that goes with empire. And this is one incident that exposed our juvenile imperialism. The last incident that I saw exposing our juvenile imperialism to this level was the way Kenyans dressed up and had a whole ceremony to watch the royal wedding on TV. That was juvenile imperialism at its best or at its worst. So this offense, why were Kenyans offended? And this is why, because they were terrified. Those who were offended were terrified. Because when empires collapse or crack and start shaking, those who depend on them for identity are the first ones to bear the brunt or the impact of that collapse. And they're rightly scared. When slavery collapsed, those sort of after the Civil War and all that, the slave owners, some of them went on to become politicians. They retained their wealth and all that. But no one realized just how bad the suffering was of the 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 so-called house Negroes, the slaves that were part of the slavery system, who helped keep their fellow blacks down. They were immediately exposed to the wrath of suddenly free slaves. Many of them must have died very bad deaths. And in the community of nations, Kenya is now scared because NATO is shaking. But a short while ago, last year, Kenya was very proud of being declared a NATO ally or some strange such thing, some strange status that it sort of just meant we are the Europeans' favorite African country. So we felt great because of that. Kenya involved itself in an imperialist exercise in Haiti last year. And we got patted on the head for that. I'm yet to see, I didn't see even then, what actual gain we got from that. But we got our imperialist bonga points, if I may use that term. So we are the imperialists' favorite. And you can imagine how scared we become when the empire we serve so faithfully is showing signs of collapse. That's why Kenyans got upset. The things that go on in the sort of revolutions, and I'm not talking about revolutions in violence, I'm talking about mental revolutions that have happened in various African countries. I can mention Tanzania to some extent. You see the Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, those West African countries. There's revolutions that have happened there, mental revolutions. And the childish juveniles that you find amongst Kenyan society are terrified by those revolutions because we've invested all our energy, resources, and intellect in trying to perfect the European way. And these guys are suddenly demonstrating that there's another path. We are suddenly feeling irrelevant. Though the imperialists amongst us are suddenly feeling very irrelevant. And that's scary. And that's why this day you hear when people talk about Burkina Faso has done this, you'll see these juvenile imperialists saying, that's a very poor country. What do they have? They have nothing. You hear someone talks about something happening even in our neighboring countries. They're behind us. They're far behind us. We are miles ahead of them. We are the giant of East Africa. We are this. We are that. We are that. No, you just need to travel to find out. Some people even say you hear there's a common saying people a common line people trade around in Kenya when you see when government shows incompetence in one area or another. People say, at this rate, Tanzania is going to overtake us. Who told you they were behind us? I'm not saying they're ahead of us, but who told you they were behind us? They're running their own race. They're not racing with us. Any country that is racing with Kenya is a country on the way to confusion. Why would you want to follow where this country is going? There's been a lot of questions about what is our foreign policy. And it cost us, like at the AUC elections. No one could see what does this country stand for. Look at our behavior with the Congo crisis. Look at our behavior with the Sudan crisis. What do we stand for? And people, you see scholars talking a lot about why is Kenya's foreign policy ambiguous or what is. No, this is wrong to talk about that because we actually don't have any foreign policy. And that's why discussing Kenya can be so exhausting because you end up talking about so many things that don't exist. I'm also guilty of that. I often talk about the problems of our education system. We don't have an education system. Because if you say it has problems, you imply that it exists. We often talk about how our national health insurance system is not working. That talk is actually wrong because it implies that we have a national health insurance system. And that is what brings terror to the heart of imperialists. Now, to be an imperialist when you are not an empire, that can be defined as childishness. That's why I said this monologue is part of the growing up series. When you are an imperialist and you don't have an empire, that's childishness. When you are whipping, if you think back to the days of slavery, those who were whipping slaves but that they don't own and they're also slaves, those were childish people. If you think back to Kenya's independence struggle, the black African home guards who are torturing their compatriots at the behest of the imperial colonialists, those were childish people. Those were imperialists. So those of us even who didn't, we are now fast forward to today, those of us who didn't even participate in these injustices, we need to grow out of the mentality that engendered those injustices. And you can see how far it spreads because when the war between Ukraine and Russia first broke out, Kenya was, I think, that by then was a temporary member of the UN Security Council. And our Ambassador Martin Kimani, gave a long, childish imperial speech at the UN expressing his pride in our imperial colonial borders in Africa. That was childish. And the imperialist president, even the British ambassador, those empires that colonized Africa, did not speak so robustly in defense of what they did to Africa. How can an African do that? And nothing he said there demonstrated any direction on the part of Kenya. And those who praised him for his speech are imperialists. No one else could gain anything or learn anything from his speech. Now, the so-called rules-based world order need to be called out for what it is. It is racism, it's imperialism. When the war broke out in Ukraine, you remember the journalists could not hide how appalled they were to see white refugees. And anyone who reads history would pick up on that. He said, we are seeing blonde, blue-eyed refugees. It's bad to have any refugee is bad. But you realize that the world is so used to black refugees, brown refugees, and refugees from all over the global south. But white people are not supposed to be refugees under the so-called rules-based world order. So this was like an impudent wind that blew away Europe's cloak and left Europe naked. That's just what it is. And now countries and nations and peoples have to stand up for what they stand for. So when there's a harsh wind like that blowing, tighten the rope you have around you so that it's secure. That Kenyans are busy running looking for a spare rope to cover up someone else's nakedness as a result of this wind. So the individuals that are protagonists in the collapse of imperialism, they are not conquerors. They are just part of the process that's happening. So when I speak about the fall of imperialism and my satisfaction at it, it is not because I support one person or the other. It's just that my support is for self-determination. And the countries that are ready mentally prepared to do that will thrive in the next few years. Those that are not mentally prepared for that will keep on trying to look for robes to cover up the nakedness of somebody else. They will keep trying to support sides, this binary thinking, where a nation chooses to support one rebel side in a fight in another nation, like what Kenya is doing with Sudan. Those are not results of policy. Those are just results of binary thinking and childishness. So let's not try and make it seem like there's any logic behind what we are doing as a nation. There isn't any. And the hope for this nation, actually, even the recent political events, they show us that none of those people we call leaders stand for anything. They don't stand for anything at all. Because right now, I think the most insecure people in Kenya are senior government officials, because they are messing around so much that none of them is secure in their future. And leaders who are not secure in their immediate future certainly cannot perform in the various offices that they have. They're reduced to the childish status of a child waiting for the next meal, a child who doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow because he or she has no say in it or is not able to plan for it. This is the definition of childishness. And this is what we have to grow out of. The idea that someone knows better, someone's taking care of it, someone's thinking about it, and you and me do not have to think about it. That's the definition of childishness. And that's what we have to grow out of. And I think as someone who's tried in vain to explain these things for so long, world events couldn't have come at a better time for me. Because right now, you don't need to believe what I'm saying. Just open the nearest newspaper or switch on the news and see what's happening. So it will happen whether you like it or not. Your choice is whether or not to be prepared for it. So let's think about that, especially with the politics, reference to the politics of our country. And let's grow up. If we grow up before the next election, we can fix this place.